We are giving up our privacy at a scale that it is unthinkable.
Normal signals like, oh, the stock market's reaching all-time highs, or GDP is 3.2%. Well, those signals usually would indicate to you that we're in a healthy economy. But then all you have to do is take scratch a little bit below the surface, and you find out that it's a very, very thin cover of an economy that's kind of sucking wind.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show, the home of Googlization Nation, where we talk with HR and business thought leaders about the crazy, never normal shift going on all around us. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of people, business, and technology. Here is your host, Ira Wolfe.
And welcome back, everyone, to the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization show. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. I'm Ira Wolfe. If you think this is just another podcast, think again, because this is the voice of the most important conversations on the future of work, confronting business leaders and people today. Our goal is to bring you ways to reimagine tomorrow and explore the ever-changing convergence of business, people, and technology. On today's show, we're going to take an uncensored look into our economy and welcome back our friends from Odeon Capital Conversations. We'll be talking politics, labor markets, AI, and wherever the conversation leads us. But before I welcome our esteemed panel, I'm thrilled to welcome Avanti as our new sponsor of Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Avanti is at the forefront of making everywhere work. Its innovative IT solutions help us find, heal, and protect every device everywhere automatically so employees can work better from anywhere.
Avanti Solutions Summit 2024 is just around the corner. Join us in April to shape the future of work together with Avanti. Learn more about this exciting event and register on the Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization website. Use code SMIndustryPartners.
And now, let's get to the reason you're all listening today. Our panel today includes Jim Toes. Jim is president and CEO of Security Traders Association, a grassroots trade organization which serves individuals employed in the financial services industry. He also was a candidate and is still a candidate in New York's 3rd Congressional District to replace the ousted Representative George Santos. We'll hear more about that as well. Prior to joining the STA, Jim was the managing director of Bank of America Merrill Lynch. And welcome back. We're going to welcome back Mat Van Alstyne, who's been a familiar guest on Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization for about the last year and a half or so. Matt is co-founder and managing partner of Odeon Capital Group, a New York-based independent broker-dealer with trading, investment banking, and research services. And Matt is also the highly respected thought leader on money and markets. And last but not least is my friend John Aidan Byrne. John's an experienced Wall Street business journalist and editor and successful podcast host and producer. He hosts the successful Odeon Capital Conversations podcast, as well as the popular Dig Life Deep podcast, on which I visit each episode for an update on the Future Shock 2.0. John, by the way, and this is great news, was recently hired as a consultant and advisor to the producer of a new movie on the extraordinary career of a legendary Wall Street CEO and company founder, philanthropist, and inventor. John is also part of the executive team on this movie in development. Welcome back, gentlemen, to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Okay. Thank you all for being here. I think this is a little bit of deja vu, at least for John and Matt, going back to Yogi Berra's classic line, because we're on the brink, talking about economics, we're on the brink of another shutdown. And it seems like every time we're on, we're either just past the shutdown or there's another shutdown coming up. But besides that, we've been talking for the last year about AI. We've been talking about labor markets. We've been talking about recessions, economy, soft landings. So we got a lot to talk about. And now we're in the throes of our election that is coming up. So lots of uncertainty. Let's start out with this question. And we can just go around. We're going to, Jim, you're the virgin on the show, on the Geeks Googlization show. We'll start with you, getting your perspective of what we're seeing. What are some of the key drivers that you're seeing that are shaping your work, shaping some of the future work, shaping some of the markets in what's a pretty wacky political and economic environment? And you're in the throes of it because you're straddling both worlds. You're straddling the markets, and you're straddling politics.
Mm-hmm. Well, so first of all, thanks for having me on today, and also STA to just kind of talk a little bit about things that we're seeing here. And you are correct. Like, the organization STA does sit in the middle of two worlds, right? Our members obviously are practitioners in the financial services industry, and they're individuals. And I think that's a very key for your audience to kind of realize, is that most trade associations, it's the firm that's the member of the association, like Morgan Stanley is a member of SIFMA, some of the larger ones. Our members are individuals; they're the employees. So we tend to do more things around career development. So it's just it kind of drives what we do. Listen, Washington D.C. touches every single industry in our nation, whether it's healthcare, technology, energy, and obviously finance as well. So there is a lot that is going on. I'm sure we're going to get through it, as we get more into our conversation here. But there's an enormous amount that's going on in the middle, at the midpoint of finance and Washington, D.C. If you pick an industry, there's going to be a government agency. And if there's a government agency, there's going to be at least 2 congressional committees that have oversight of that. So we can get into more details later on. But obviously, as it pertains to us, we're dealing with the government agency being the SEC, and then the 2 committees of the Senate Banking and the House Financial Services Committee, where we try to do as much work down there as far as educating. We don't lobby. We're an industry advocate, and we just try to come up with solutions that are common sense and try to get our industry in a good spot.
Thanks, Matt. Again, we've been back and forth for, I think this is our 6th or 7th show over the last year and a half or so. We were initially talking about the, what the economy was going to look like. And, we talked about this just a few weeks ago, whether we were going to have a recession or a soft landing. And, we keep hitting records on the markets. And I know that doesn't always translate to what the general population's going. But what are you seeing that's maybe a little different than where we were just a few months ago?
Well, I don't think there's anything that's really changed. I mean, you look at the GDP number that just got revised today. It's 3.2%, which represents close to $400 billion of economic growth. But in that same period, you have the government issuing $600 billion of debt. So it's kind of a vacuum medicated economy. When you're issuing $600 billion of debt to grow less than that, you can kind of hear that giant sucking sound that Ross Perot made famous way back when. and in terms of, the markets setting records, well, you look at the NASDAQ and it's up, I believe, like almost $1.8 trillion year to date. But if you look at the market caps of the various companies that compose the NASDAQ, the 4 biggest, NVIDIA being the big one, is up combined, they're up 1.7 trillion. So you have 4 companies up 1.7 trillion of an entire market that's up 1.8 trillion. And you're kind of saying, okay, is this a medicated economy? Like, what are we doing here? In terms of Washington, the reason we're living this Groundhog Day is because I don't know where there's adults or if our system is broken, but we don't have leaders in Washington, because, the whole premise of getting rid of the Speaker of the House was to return to regular order. And ever since then, all we've been doing is every 4 or 5 weeks, they do another continuing resolution, which was the one thing that, this guy, Matt Gaetz, which, I mean, he must be a pyromaniac because he's trying to burn the whole place down with him, was saying we're going to get away from continuing resolutions. And yet that's all they've been doing since then. So you have a do nothing Congress, you have a president who seems to be more focused on prosecuting his opponent and keeping his opponents off the ballot than actually governing a country. And so to me, it seems like a very chaotic world where your normal signals like, oh, the stock market's reaching all-time highs, or GDP is 3.2%. Well, those signals usually would indicate to you that we're in a healthy economy. But then all you have to do is take scratch a little bit below the surface, and you find out that it's a very, very thin cover of an economy that's kind of sucking wind. The government should not be issuing $600 billion of debt to get $400 billion of growth. And in terms of Jim running for office, man, I take my hat off to you. It requires good people like you to do stuff like that and get in there. And it just seems like, the number of Republican committee chairmen who are resigning this year, to me, sends a really bad sign that good people get to Washington, get frustrated and throw in the towel. And that something's got to give, something's got to change. And I congratulate you, and I hope you get there. And I really hope that you get there and you stick it out and kind of be a voice for reform.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I mean, listen, I agree with a lot we just said. I mean, I think coming into this, it doesn't feel sustainable. We've both been around a long time. We don't know that there are. First of all, I just appreciate the fact that you kind of started with facts and then developed your opinion. Often we find politicians that have their opinion, and as we all know from the beginning of time, that there are always economic indicators out there that can kind of be used to support an opinion that you already have on this, right? So listen, there are conflicting, indicators out there. I mean, inflation obviously is something that is of concern for all of us because we're living it. We can see it, feel it, and touch it. I think that the government, the market continues to perform well from it, but at the end of the day, you cannot browbeat people into thinking something that they're not feeling. All right, so that they're browbeating everybody, saying the Bidenomics is great, everything is great. If you're not doing great, then you don't understand what's going on here. At the end of the day, people are going to go to the voting booth in November, and they're going to vote how they feel and what they're experiencing, and not what they're necessarily hearing as far as how great everything is in our economy today on it. The debt, I'll just say one thing on the debt. I mean, the debt is just not, man. I mean, I know we get tone deaf to some of hearing about the amount of money that gets spent down there and the debt that we're running. But this is just not sustainable, and people are having some real hard problems understanding the amount of money that's being spent for interests outside of our country when we have major problems inside of our country. And whether it's the incident that happened down in Hawaii, where people got, checks of $700 when they lost their homes, or the southern border, or veterans benefits, or homelessness, they're not understanding, and nor should they understand why we're spending so much money abroad when we have all these problems going on at home.
My hat's off to you, Jim, as well. I've known you a very long time, since the days I was editing Traders magazine. But I'm going to pick up on some of those themes. I agree with both Matt and Jim. Deficit spending, servicing our national debt in this era of high interest rates is just, it's shocking. It's a big problem. We've got housing gridlock in the United States. We have the phenomena of part-time workers and underemployment. I saw a story recently that half of workers have more than one full-time job in America. And so kind of makes you wonder about these government reports coming out about the creation in jobs. The other issue we should mention is the wars across the globe and the heightened state of global tensions, political polarization. But I think there's a bigger theme here to sort of tie a bow around it. I think it's the attack on values, this new ideology that's taken hold in Western society. Our institutions are under attack. Our education system is under attack. Our judiciaries are under attack. Our families are under attack. Free enterprise system is under attack. And there's a sort of a rise of what we might want to call a kind of an aggressive relativism, where everything is up for grabs. We used to agree a few generations ago that this thing was the right journey here. This was right, that was wrong. Now everything's basically make up your own mind. You can't have civil order, and if you can't have in a society that goes by that, ideology, as it were, and if you don't have a good civic order, you can't agree on debt reduction, you can't agree on how we're going to be a prosperous nation or how we're going to govern ourselves. So I think we have to kind of come together as a society in the West, and we can deal with a lot of issues, and we do need people like Jim Toes to get us there.
Hey, can I just go back to something you said, John, and I don't let it go by. You said that in the past we all agreed, and we're all kind of white-haired or no-haired, white males, but we're all old enough to have lived, and I keep going back to look at times that we tend to forget. I was, grown up and in college during the, here's my 60s. President dies, civil rights leader dies, presidential candidate assassinated. So within a 5-year period, we had 3 assassinations in this country of major figures. We had an unpopular war, which we got now. We had a screwed up economy, which we have now. We had conversations about abortion, which we have now. 60 years later, I'm not sure. I mean, we're sort of being in that deja vu moment. We're sort of reliving some of that. I'm not sure we all agreed. But what we did do is we respected differences. And I think that's a huge difference. The fact that if an election was lost, there was a respect that we lost, and now we need to do better. We need to do differently. We need to get back in power. And that seems to be gone. But even respect for all differences, it seems to be what's lost. I don't want to get too philosophical, but I think that's a huge difference. I'm not sure that we all agreed in the past.
No, I would pick up on that. Some of what you said makes sense. We had, we had the Civil Rights Act and various other acts to right a lot of historical injustices. We get all that. And we had the Vietnam era, and we had the riots on the campuses. I wasn't here then. I was over in Ireland.
Yeah, you were having your own wars.
Yeah, right. We're still sorting them out. But you could take the post-Second World War era, 1950s. They were a lot more stable times here. One person could be the breadwinner. And in a sense, by that definition, we were a wealthier nation in many ways. We carried far less debt. There was more stability in families and homes. Everybody seemed a lot more united politically and agreed more. And then we had the fallout, from Vietnam and the other debacles.
Yeah, I don't know how. I don't even know how much politics. Because going back, because the '64 race, I'm not sure. We were pretty divided between Goldwater and Johnson, and then Johnson and Nixon. So there was always controversy, but we had, again, once it was over, we respected the differences. We may not have liked it, and certainly we had the riots and rebellion, against it, but there was still some odd way unity.
I mean, so we always had our faith too. I mean, that going back to one of John's first points here. I mean, I grew up in a household which I think was very typical back then, where I had one parent that was center right and one parent that was center left, and it was kind of like the church kind of was in the middle and kind of kept those opinions from kind of getting too pushed out. And I think that to John's point, there has been some, I don't know whether it's organized or what, but that faith that existed maybe in my household growing up doesn't really, and across a lot of other homes back then, doesn't really exist to the same degree that it did back then. And I think that that's kind of allowing these political opinions to get pushed out. And obviously, you take that and you combine it with the world of social media and news that, it's this exciting, it's the more, outrageous headline that gets more clicks and sells more. It's just a powerful, two forces there that we're seeing a lot of these opinions get pushed further out, and then they're getting amplified, even though it's a minority of people that really feel it.
Yeah, and you know, we will see where all of this takes us in the current election. This is a really volatile and fascinating election. Maybe, I know we can get into hyperbole, but this might be the most important general election, presidential election in our history. You know, it could make or break the United States and the Western world.
Yeah, and if everybody can see the comment that was up there, especially that, you know, that we also had a common enemy, that Russia was the bad actor in the world, and you know, now there's even some perilous debate around that. I would assume none on this panel, but there seems to be some out there. Going back, Jim, that's a really interesting point. And then I want to reel this back in to talk about the future of work as well, and get into labor. But the conversation about faith and religion, you know, I think you're right. Not that because I'm not necessarily a really religious guy, but the fact is that even now, even when people have faith, religion has become political. Yeah. I'm not sure we had the alignment of so many denominations aligned with a political party. Yeah. Without going into that. So I think, you know, it's we.
Everywhere.
Yeah. Let's reel this back in a little bit. Let's talk about the future of work, since that's what the show's about, and all this relates to it. So, with all this going on,
it does all relate to it. Yes,
yeah.
Of course.
With all this going on, ultimately, it comes down to a conversation about careers, jobs, the future. I mean,
yes.
and our labor markets. You know, we've had kind of unprecedented. I don't know how many months now that we've had low unemployment. I mean, I know we're in the records in that amount. Studying that for 20 years, I'm not sure how we're getting out of that. Don't see any major changes in well, hopefully we'll have some changes in immigration and make it a little bit better. But, you know, even now, as they're talking about the boost in employment and the low unemployment, has a lot to do with coming in the country that are getting employed somehow. But we need to fix it. Excuse me?
Undocumented citizens is the politically correct term.
Yeah. Undocumented citizens. So, yeah, but they're a boost to the economy. I mean, apparently that's what's make, you know, at least in some industries is helping us make that make the economy hum. But what's the talk? I mean, where does all this conversation impact what people are concerned with? I'm teaching an undergrad class, 18 to 22-year-old kids in innovation and entrepreneurship. You know, I'm trying to impress upon them how skills are changing rapidly, but ultimately, what they're getting degrees in isn't necessarily going to be what they're doing for the future. I'm trying to instill in an entrepreneurial mindset rather than to say you all need to be entrepreneurs. You have to have the mindset of growth and change and adaptability. So what are you seeing out there? And I'm going to let me go to Matt first, because I know we've had a conversation about this in the past. Is where are you seeing labor markets? What's changing on Wall Street? How is AI, you know, impacting it, or where do you think AI will impact it?
I mean, Wall Street is going to be a fascinating case study for a future professor, you know, years from now, because, you know, there's this promise of AI being a better stock picker or better portfolio arranger. And, you know, the fundamental thesis behind efficient market hypothesis, which is, you know, the first class you take when you're learning about the finance world, is the market is efficient and it directs funds rationally to where they belong. And if funds start chasing one dream or one idea too much, then it makes other areas cheap. And so I have this view that maybe the AI might over concentrate investing in certain areas that will then allow humans to go in and pick up the bargain chips. You know, the same way that Warren Buffett talked about. You know, you pick up dollars that look like nickels. In terms of where work is going, I think I'm not the first person or the only person to be surprised. As I was growing up, we were, kind of had this view of 30 or 40 years from now, we're all going to have robots that cook us breakfast and the driverless truck, transporting stuff across the economy.
Just
Jetsons.
this
morning, the Jetsons. And instead, what we're getting is the knowledge economy is what's being replaced. Just this morning, Stripe, the credit card processing company, they've been laying off customer service agents, and they put out a release, or it was in an interview that they said that right now AI is replacing about 700 customer ChatGPT, which they've partnered with, replaced about 700 of their customer service agents. And so it's looking like it's going to be the white collar people that are losing their jobs. You saw I can't remember his name, the director down in Atlanta. He was building an $800 million movie studio, and he put it on pause when he saw what ChatGPT's video creator could do in describing scenes, and he realized he's not going to need 80,000 square feet of studio space to create his vision when he's creating a movie. All he needs is a really, really good GMU and a GPU that has great ChatGPT inputs. And we're at the very, very, very beginning of this revolutionizing everything. And so I think you're right that your students aren't going to be practicing in a career that they studied and prepared for, because it was 5 years ago, the joke was during layoffs, they can learn to code. Well, now you see people like Peter Thiel out there saying, don't bother learning to code, because you're never going to be able to keep up with AI. It's going to be a much better coder than you will ever be. So don't bother kind of approach. And to your point on the immigration, the jobs that they're coming in here are not high profile jobs. It's picking fruit, it's picking vegetables, it's doing deliveries, it's low education, hard labor type of work that the American workforce isn't designed for. And I don't think this is at all what people, especially thought leaders and politicians, have designed our system around to be. And as you see with, like Section 230 of the Communications Act, where, the Supreme Court is just struggling. Like, are these common carriers? Are they regulated utilities? Are they broadcasters? What are they, newspapers? Like, these laws that are interpreting, we're trying to interpret 1800s and 1900s laws for a future that no one really knows what it's going to be like. And I can't imagine going to college and picking a career being like, okay, this is going to be a safe career, because you can see AI taking over accounting. You can see AI taking over a lot of the legal stuff. You can see it taking over script writing and so forth. And where does that leave us? I don't know.
We've discussed this, Ira, together on Future Shock 2.0 on my podcast. The phenomena of going to college is changing. I mean, we do notice that a lot of colleges are actually closing, some of it because they can't finance their continuity and can't pay staff or whatever. And a lot of kids are skipping college now and going into the trades. That's quite a substantial number. And some are not going to college and learning maybe to code or do computer-related things and getting very highly paid jobs in the computer industry. But education is paramount. I'm not undermining it. A good, solid education, we need educated people, doctors, engineers, and so on and so forth. But we don't need an oversupply at the same time. On the immigration has saved America from total collapse over the past 20, 30 years. Our fertility rate has plunged, the native born growth in the number of children, that's down. So we need immigrants, and they've been a great benefit to America. The immigrants coming across the southern border, I sort of agree with Matt there. They're picking up, if any of them are working, and most of them apparently are not, because it's a very unsettled situation, would be doing low wage work. Two quick anecdotes. I know an employer in Massachusetts who runs a chain of Dunkin' Donuts, a very big chain. He couldn't find local staff for a lot of the slots, and he heard about all these undocumented coming across from the southern border, being housed in hotels in Massachusetts. And he spoke to the authorities, and he was able to get paperwork to put 20 of those, call them what you want, aliens, undocumented, to work in his Dunkin' Donuts. He immediately solved his hiring problem. So you see what's going on. There's a very strange dynamic. We don't have enough locals. We need to bring in immigrants. But the situation in the southern border is a total and utter disaster. And that's another problem in this country. We can't solve it. And they can't agree in Washington what everybody in America is crying out for.
Yeah. Solve it. Well, I got to tell you, there's two things. I want to go back to something that Matt kind of talked about, and that's, the change. And I think what's a little bit, I don't want to call it unnerving, but it is definitely different, is the speed at which the change is happening. Right now, I did a job that was very manual. The first generation of technology that came into, trading securities electronically had some benefits. I was able to trade more stocks. I was able to trade them a little bit better. But then I just got eaten like that Pac-Man show by the technology in it. So I do feel that the amount of change that we're seeing right now, it's not so much the change, it's just how rapidly a new technology comes in, and then bang, it's like it's omnipresent and it's disrupted so quickly. I mean, I guess I'm trying to, the Wright brothers, when they first did that plane thing, it took like 50 years to go from like that glider to like a plane, but then we went from a plane to a rocket ship like overnight. And I think that's what I think where we are kind of in this technology part, is that technology is into financial services. It has touched every industry, but now we're getting this like 2.0 or 3.0 version of it, where it's going to be disrupted much quicker than when it first came in originally. To the immigration point, John, what I'll say to you, I mean, listen, the driver here obviously is that we are a consumer. We are an economy built for the consumer on trying to get goods as cheap as possible, and obviously labor is a big part of the cost that goes into anything that we're purchasing on it. COVID was one of those there were so many aha moments that came out of COVID for so many of us. And as it pertains to labor, like I had no idea. Yes, I knew that immigrants were doing certain jobs, but I had no idea how they were in every single industry. The slaughterhouses. I had no idea. That those slaughterhouses are a lot of immigrants. That's probably probably at one point was a good paying job. Mm-hmm. But now immigrants are doing that. They are so involved in our economy right now. An economy that, again, that's built for the consumer and lower prices. I don't know how we kind of go back to the kid who only has 2 years of high school getting that kind of a job when they're competing with the people that are coming and willing to do it for a lot less.
Jim will remember the time where there was at least 5,500 brokers, floor traders on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Today, you're lucky if there's a couple of hundred. That was an example of very rapid and accelerating technology, the advances, and of course, government regulation also did that, because it enabled this arrival of new machines. And the other government regulation, you could say it was probably welcome, was the moving from fractional increments in stock trading to decimals. And now, while we have less floor traders and brokers, we probably have net just as many jobs for traders, Jim, right? I mean, overall,
I don't know. I feel like, I started out in the NASDAQ world, and we probably had 50 traders and 30 assistants. And I remember going into a morning meeting, around 10 years later, when everything was kind of coming together, and there were 6 of us. We were like, do you realize that we are the last 6 that are doing NASDAQ securities here? Yeah. When they put the departments together. So, but again, I don't think it was an equal. Oh, they fired one high touch trader, and then they hired one person on the electronic desk. It was not a 1-for-1 on that. So
I would.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. What I meant was overall with back office and engineers and computers. So
yeah,
okay.
And in that vein, I mean, is that in every revolution and every transition with automation and technology, we've always had new jobs created that still could be related to the field. So I don't know, if their income levels and what their careers would be like, but we certainly have an abundance of financial advisors, wealth management advisors that might have been maybe a trader in the past and now is in a different role. But many of those roles may now be in transition too because of AI, as well. Matt, what's I know we've talked about this before, and you've just shared. I mean, it's going to really disrupt and change, what Wall Street looks like. But what are you seeing in far as transitions of jobs right now, and anything in specific?
I mean, our business has changed dramatically just because of Gary Gensler coming in. I mean, this guy, he doesn't walk softly and carry a big stick. He walks loudly and carries a sledgehammer. And everything that he has just imposed and is imposing on from the way he changed underwriting for IPOs to the way he's changed from 3-day settlement to 2-day settlement to soon to be 1-day settlement, and now he's trying to impose on bond trading the same type of reporting that you get in stock trading. From right now, bonds are reported within 15 minutes of posting a trade. Stocks, I believe it's 1 second. And he wants bonds to be at 1 second, which I think for us, it adds a lot of bodies. We have to have a lot more people in back office just to be able to handle the paces of change. And I eventually think that this will get automated once firms get up to speed and get used to it. But in my mind, he's looking at things that ain't broke, don't need fixing, and he's breaking them, trying to fix them. And it's causing a lot of tension with back offices and also with the regulators coming in, because every time they do a change, there's gaps in compliance, not on purpose, but because you have to get used to the new way of working. So as of now, I feel like Wall Street is playing catch up to AI. You look at these salaries, and like ChatGPT advertises that their average engineer makes $900,000 a year. Well, that pricing level for AI talent, resets the price level for every competent programmer and back office AI person. And so right now we're on the wall, climbing the wall of worry of expenses rising before we get the actual benefit of all the automation that might be coming.
Yeah, there's two themes that are going across, and and again bringing it back because I talk about this every single day of my working life, is the speed of change. And there's a lot of analogies that are out there about what's different this time is the pace of the change, the accelerating pace. And there's quite a few people, they came up with all these analogies. McKinsey came up a few years ago and said that the next 10 years will be, change will accelerate by 3,000 times over what it did before. They had a formula for that. Ray Kurzweil has determined that we're going to experience 100 years of change in less than 10 years. That's what progress is going to look like. And we still live on this linear line, or this linear curve, if you will, that it's going to happen incrementally, that we have time, and it's not. It's happening behind the scenes as far as the disruption. And, if there's any message, it's apparent that it's affecting everyone. Hard to believe, but we've got like 7 minutes left on this show. And we barely scratched the surface on a lot of things. So what I want to do is give everybody a chance, and which means if we divide that out, you got about 1.5 minutes for everyone. What's one question or one thought or one comment that each of you would like to share? And Rebel just shared that we got about 10 minutes. So each got about 2 minutes. What's one question, one thought, one burning issue, your mind that relates to everything we talked about, the future of work, labor, AI, economy?
Well,
any of you can start.
Maybe we need a pause on AI, but that won't go down too well with a lot of people. We'd be called Luddites. But remember last year, Elon Musk and a lot of leaders in the tech field and at the college level said we need to pause for 6 months. This thing could just get completely out of control, could be a total and utter disaster. There's privacy issues, there's technological issues, there's gaming issues, there's security issues, just a ton of issues that need to be properly addressed. So that's one thought. I think the restoration of civic order, then that'll lead to a lot more prosperity across the globe and people come together. The end of all this crazy polarization, and then we need to get Jim Toes elected.
Yeah. Well, I'll pick up on one thing because it is something that's being discussed right now. I mean, listen, the government regulators, they never move as fast as the markets do. So we've always lived in that problem. But obviously with technology moving as fast as it does, the government needs to find a way to kind of pick up the pace a little bit on some of this. And the area where I think where I would kind of just challenge people to think about is that area around, you want the government to protect you, but then you also have rights to your privacy. And the amount of information that a government needs from you in order to protect you, that's a lot of private information that they are grabbing from you now. And how do they protect that? And that's just something we need to be thinking about. How comfortable are you giving this information to the government, which they need to perform some level of protection around this, around who's purchasing what, around it. But on the other hand, we are giving up our privacy at a scale that it is unthinkable. The amount of information and the comfort that we have with just giving information to the government or even companies. Clear has my retina scan, and all this stuff that can be hacked. And we just need to really be thinking about that yes, we want our government to be protecting us from these things. That is going to require them to have information, but just seriously just think about how that infringes on your rights and your privacy.
I think an area, I agree with Jim and John too, but I think an area that we're really not focused on as a country is we're very Europe-centric. Our biggest national security group, NATO, is comprised, aside from Canada, of all European nations. And our foreign policy looks through the world through a European lens. And what we're missing as a country, in my mind, is if you look at the demographic trends, Europe has been shrinking as a percent of global population, for going on 5 or 6 decades now, and it's accelerating. Germany has a demographic crisis. UK has a demographic crisis. France has a demographic crisis. Those are the 3 biggest countries or economies in Europe. And in the meantime, Asia is growing leaps and bounds. So we're, as a country, hitching our wagon to a part of the world that is shrinking in importance and shrinking in size and shrinking in scope, while the areas that we're not focused on, Africa and Asia, are growing rapidly. And I think we, as a country, need to, at a minimum, recognize that Europe is not the future of where the global conflicts will be or where global stability should be sought. In fact, Europe looks more and more like it's going to have economic stagnation as their populations begin to shrink and move into retirement mode. And the only reason America is unique from that is the immigration. And the problem we have with the immigration, which is well known and well documented, but it would be great if we could have a controlled immigration where we're getting the workers we want versus the workers we don't want, and we can get people who can show up and do jobs legally, pay into the system, get their families established, and become Americans, rather than be left in limbo for decades and decades on end. Especially these children that are in here without documents that become adults and are educated and speak English and have a real struggle because they're relying on former executive orders from presidents from 3 presidencies ago to keep them working. And so we need in my mind, we need a wholesale change as to what America's role is in the world and a reapproach to that and stop being so European centric.
I'll drink to that. So, Matt, we'll stick with you. How can people learn more about Odeon Capital Group? How can they get in touch with you?
Well, we have a website, odeoncapital.com. We tend to focus on high net worth customers and hedge funds, but we do our podcast with John. We're on a hiatus right now. We're going to relaunch, and it's Odeon Capital Conversations on all the streaming platforms.
Yeah, definitely can recommend that. Jim.
Yeah.
How can people learn more about you, get in touch with you, and you're walking those double lives?
Yeah. I mean, for STA, we're out there too. LinkedIn, Twitter, STA, securitytraders.org. We're out there.
Okay. And what about if they're interested in your political life?
Yeah, well, it's easy. Well, if the last name like Toes, it's easy to find me. Toes for Congress. It's I got a website as well. So.
And you're actually a registered Republican versus the last candidate?
I am. Yes, I have. Yeah.
And I did mention that Jim had a career on Wall Street. The famous George apparently didn't, or was certainly stretched reality quite a bit.
In more than one area. So, John, and what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, I have my own website, johnaidanbyrne.com. They can do byrnedesk@gmail.com. That's probably the one I look at. They can reach out to you, Ira, and listen to Odeon Capital Conversations, dig life deep, and I'll be in touch with them very quickly.
And we'll look forward to that movie.
Yeah,
that's coming out.
It's going to be a blockbuster.
Yeah. Well, incredibly fast. We barely. There's so many more questions that I'm sure we all ask. I hope you all will come back on again. Usually we get you back like every 2-3 months, and at that point we'll be in the heat of the political conventions. So I'm sure there'll be a lot going on. And Jim, hopefully you might have a new career.
Yeah.
or a career path as well.
I just turned 60, and I couldn't think of another industry that could offer me a 20-year career other than politics.
and a retirement plan, right?
You have apparently a lovely gym in Washington.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Thank you for being part of Googlization Nation. If you haven't joined Googlization Nation yet, please do. It's free to join. Just go to googlizationnation.com. I want to extend a special thank you to our guests, John Aidan Byrne, Jim Toes, and Mat Van Alstyne, and all our listeners for tuning in. We had a great audience today. If you haven't subscribed to Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization on your favorite podcast, please do so. And remember, until next time, don't let the shift hit your plans.
Thanks for watching Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. Be sure to listen to the podcast and follow us on YouTube. This show was produced and edited by Hilton Productions.